Hey everyone, it's Arminder from the Rum Revival. So this is going to be an overview and tasting guide for the rums from Appleton Estate and its sibling distillery, New Yarmouth. Now, both the distilleries are owned by Wray and Nephew, and collectively they are the largest producer of Jamaican rums with some of the most famous and iconic and widely available rums on the market. So what I'm going to do here is break down all the rums in their portfolio that are available here in the US. I'm gonna share some tasting notes on them and then give you my honest thoughts and opinions on each of them. Now, before we start, I do wanna give a little bit of background. So according to the brand, rums have been distilled at Appleton Estate since 1749. Now with New Yarmouth, distillation kind of first took place around 1817. And then in 1916, the Wray and Nephew company ends up buying the Appleton Estate and distillery. And then in 1986, they also acquire New Yarmouth. Then in 2012, Wray and Nephew, and therefore Appleton Estate and New Yarmouth Estate, they're sold to Campari, which owns brands like Campari, but also Wild Turkey, Cavassier, and Sky Vodka. Now, in terms of production, unlike some of the other Jamaican distilleries, Appleton doesn't really use crazy fermentation techniques like wild fermentation or the use of dunder or muck. They do use a proprietary cultured yeast strain that's propagated from the estate, but their standard fermentation typically lasts only around 36 hours, which isn't long, but it's not super short. But relatively speaking, compared to other Jamaican distilleries like Appleton Estate that can go to 2 to 3 weeks for their fermentations, 36 hours is definitely short. Also, another thing that I realized preparing for this video and doing research for it, Appleton really loves to emphasize the importance of their natural limestone filtered water. They go on and on about it in every single interview I've watched or interview I've read. It's kind of a thing. And look, I'm not saying that the water and the quality of the water doesn't affect the rum, but I'm also really? Now, in terms of fermentation at New Yarmouth, we don't know much. They don't really let people visit, and they don't say much about what's going on there, so it's kind of tough to get a full picture of their process. But my understanding is that they are capable of producing higher ester rums there. By what methods? I don't know. Now, in terms of distillation, both distilleries have both pot and column stills. And in terms of releases, the vast majority of rums put out by Wray and Nephew are pot column blends. Now, given the more straightforward fermentation techniques at Appleton and the fact that it's mostly pot column blends, most of their stuff, frankly, is a bit on the tame side when it comes to funk, relative to what certain other Jamaican distilleries like a Hamden can put out, right? They can put out big, bold, funky, overripe tropical fruit bombs, and Appleton Estate's rums aren't really that. That's not to say they aren't flavorful, because they are. They're just not gonna be that type of Jamaican rum. Now that's a quick little background on Appleton and New Yarmouth. Now let's actually start talking about the rums here. We're gonna actually start with the core range of Appleton stuff, the year-round releases, the Signature, the 8, the 12-year, the 15, and the 21-year. So we're gonna start off with Appleton Signature, which is their entry-level rum in their lineup. It is, at least near me, around $21. It's bottled at 40% ABV, and this is the only rum in the core Appleton range that is 40. The others are 43% ABV. Now, in terms of how old the rums are in here, they don't necessarily say that anywhere on the label or on their website, but sources online say on average the rums in here are about 4 years, but don't quote me on that. I gotta say, for a 40% ABV rum, for a $20 rum, this has a lovely aroma. It's very fruit forward. I get stone fruit, I get citrus. There's even, once you really let this open up, to me on the aroma, I get a little bit of papaya. Now, first things first, for someone who drinks a lot of higher ABV rums, yeah, at 40% ABV, this feels light and thin. Yes, for sure. But, especially preparing for this video, I was so surprised by the amount of flavor that is actually here. There is an element of honey and or a very light molasses, but it's kind of accented with a little bit of tea, a little bit of black tea. On the fruity side, the thing that I really pick up is a little bit of apricot or peach. It's not big and bold apricot or peach, but to me, it's clearly there. The thing going into preparation for this video, and by preparation, I mean drinking a lot of these rums, the thing that really surprised me, because I don't think I've ever picked it up before, is I do get a little bit of banana, right? We often, when we think about some of the other Jamaican rums, we talk a lot about overripe banana and all that, and I've never really associated overripe banana with any of the Appleton stuff, or even kind of banana, but here it kind of surprised me. So altogether, I think it is a a nice blend of fruity flavors, and I still think this is a great introduction to the category. Yeah, it's not going to be a big funk bomb like many other Jamaican rums that you will, eventually try in your kind of rum drinking life, but as a first kind of step into the wide world of Jamaican rums, I can't think of anything better, especially given the price and the overall availability. So next up is the Appleton Estate 8-year Reserve. This around where I live goes for around $37, and like I mentioned, it is 43% ABV. Now, on the aroma, it's more of a kind of richer fruit that I'm getting, a little more pronounced fruit, but I'm also getting a touch of a little bit of oakiness as well. There's even maybe a little bit of like a spiced element on the aroma. Can I just say, just gonna put all my cards out there. This is a freaking delight. This is a very delightful rum. I'm a huge fan of it. I am getting some of that apricot, but not as much as I was getting in the Signature. But it is playing with a little bit of light caramel, more than I was really getting on the Signature. But I'm also getting a stronger kind of banana. It's light. It's, again, not super strong. It's not like a Worthy Park banana, but it's like a caramelized banana. So I get a little light caramel, a little bit of caramelized banana, and there definitely is a little bit of baking spice. It has, like, to me, like almost the perfect balance between the fruity notes and the oak and aging notes. They're not equal. I think definitely there's more fruit here and more kind of vibrancy than there is the oak and the aging, which is my preference. And that extra 3% feels like it makes all the difference in the world because it feels like it has much more body and texture than the Signature. To me, I have kind of started describing the 8-year as like my favorite movie rum. And by that I mean a rum that I can sit with and drink over the course of watching a movie here at home and not in the theaters. I mean, I could do that, I guess, technically, if I wanted to. If there's a will, there's a way. But at home, when I'm watching a movie, I'll do a good pour of this. And what's great is that it's low in ABV, right, 43%. But it has flavor, but not so much that it hits you over the head. Like, it's a pleasant treat as you're watching it, but it's not forcing your attention away from the movie to the glass and to the rum. So that's what I call movie rums. And to me, this is maybe my favorite movie rum. Next up is the very iconic Appleton Estate 12-year Rare Casks release. This is, in fact, iconic. I would argue this might be one of the most well-known and well-loved rums in the entire world, actually. And when I kind of was first getting into rum, this felt like it might have been the most kind of high-quality premium rum that I had access to. Quality and luxury, but that was also attainable. Obviously, back then it was a little cheaper. Now it goes for around like $48, sometimes higher, depending on where you find it. I think for a lot of people, this is a rum that they always need to have in their collection or in their bar cart or whatnot. So on the aroma, what I get is orange peel, for sure, citrus, a little bit of orange peel. I'm getting a lot more richer kind of caramel on the aroma, a lot more wood and oak. Less kind of fruit beyond the orange peel, less of that apricot that I was getting in the other two rums. Not really picking up any kind of banana or anything like that. So I do get actually a little tiny quick pop of that caramelized banana note that I got in the 8-year, but it's quickly overtaken by a rich, sweeter back half. It's a very pronounced caramel and oak that comes through fairly quickly and kind of really takes over the finish. It's kind of mostly what I'm getting, though it is kind of accented by a little bit of orange peel and a little bit of allspice. It's a really well-made rum. It's definitely a quality rum. I just find myself reaching for it less and less over the last couple of years. It's not something that really draws me. Frankly, I much rather drink the 8-year. To me, it's got the better balance of what I'm looking for. More of that fruity note, that apricot, that banana that's going on there, and it has less of the oak and caramel. If I'm at a bar that has a very limited selection of spirits and rums, but I see the 12-year there, and there's nothing else that kind of interests me, I will be happy to drink the 12-year, and it will be an enjoyable experience. But given the option of other rums, I'm rarely going to pour a glass of the 12-year. I'm sure there are folks that are watching this right now that are huge fans of 12-year that might be bummed to hear that, but that's just me and my palate, and that just means there's more 12-year for you. Next up is the Appleton 15 Black River Casks release. This is priced around $67 near me, but I've seen it priced at $70 or even a little more. This obviously is aged 15 years. This to the US market is relatively new. I think it's been out for what, is it 3, 4, 5 years now? Something like that. And it's the Appleton rum that I probably have the least amount of experience with, given it's kind of how new it is. When I was doing a lot of my heavy Appleton drinking, this wasn't even a glimmer in its parents' eyes. On the aroma, that little bit of orange. I get a general fruitiness. Maybe I don't have it near me, but I almost feel like I get a little more fruitiness on the aroma of the 15 than I do in the 12 year. So I do get a quick flash of that caramelized banana, but now it's almost like a little toffeed. But the thing that really stands out is, yes, like with the 12, fairly quickly, and through pretty much the rest of the journey on the palate, there's a richness for sure, pronounced caramel and all that. But what the 15 is doing that I didn't get so much on the 12 is towards the back end and on the finish, it feels much more spiced. There's a little more tannins, a little bit more stronger, astringent black tea. It's not big and bold, those notes, but it's, to me, especially having just come off the 12, feels very obvious now. It's much more of a spicy kind of back end and experience. It definitely, in a way, almost it gets rich and then kind of starts drying out a little bit. Now, given everything I've talked about with the first 3 rums and kind of the balance between the fruit and the wood, yeah, this to me is not as enjoyable for me, given the larger presence, the looming presence of the wood, the little bit of tannin and the spice stuff, which I actually like in certain kind of rums, but again, given the other options I have here, not really finding myself reaching for the 15. Given that I think they're fairly similar experiences, is it worth the extra $20-ish to go from the 12 to the 15? Yeah, I don't know about that actually. I think that, I think in that case, I probably might just stick with a 12 year, I'm not getting $20 extra worth of experience. I don't feel like I'm getting $20 extra worth of age as an experience. Yes, technically there are 3 years, like I said, but I don't know where the $20 are going, frankly. And then the last core Appleton release is the Appleton Estate 21-year NASA Valley casks. It has like a really nice, heavy, fancy cork topper thing there. It's priced around like $150. It's a lot of money. Now it is 21 years of age. That's a pretty significant jump, right? Because we're jumping up math. What is that? Quick. 6 years. It took me longer than it should have. An extra 6 years of aging. You're going from roughly $70 to $150. That's a pretty big jump. On the aroma, I'm not really getting tons of fruit. Frankly, what it kind of smells like is a rum from Barbados, Mount Gay or Foursquare, which is not a bad thing, but it's definitely by this point, by the time we come here, lost most of the fruit on the aroma. So, fairly quickly, this rum dries out. Very quickly. It's much more oak forward, but it's also less rich. Like it has an initial richness up front and that caramel oak and all that, but it quickly dries up. It's very woody, right? Which is different than oaky and like caramel, just woody, dry. It has a little bit of a very slight bitter and like medicinal finish. If I'm being very honest, this rum does like absolutely nothing for me. Like there's nothing that holds my interest here. And look, I know people who really love the 21 year. That's great. I just don't get it. I don't get it. It does nothing for me. There's nothing of interest, especially compared to the price I'm paying, $150 for 43% ABV, right? Which basically means I'm spending $150 for 57% water. And there's just something about that I can never get behind. I'm sorry. Yeah, I get it. It's 21 years of age and people place a premium on those kind of numbers. I get it. But where if you're not looking for something that has a high number, that's not a thing that you look for in your rums, then what are you left with, right? Then you have to look at the experience and how much you're paying for that overall experience. Yeah, to be honest, I just think this is kind of a dull rum. Dull, especially in relation to what I know they're capable of and the kind of rums that they put out here and how vibrant the Signature and the 8-year and the 12-year to a lesser extent, how vibrant these are. It just, honestly, this rum, the 21, does not feel like it has any of the soul of these earlier rums. Now, given the 21 is like the fancy release and has the fancy heavy topper, like the crown, if you will, I think given my feelings of the range, I am actually going to take this and swap it at the 8 and give the 8 the fancy crown that I think it deserves. Now, before we move on to the other rums, I do want to actually talk about the Appleton stuff in the form of like Mai Tais, because these are all very popular rums, or definitely at least the Appleton 12 year is as a Mai Tai rum. And I, in preparing for this, drank a lot of Mai Tais with these rums to kind of see what I thought how they were in cocktails and specifically as Mai Tais. So I actually am going to talk about them, but I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to start with the 21 year and tell you what I thought. Didn't care for it. As you can imagine, it was a very dry-ish Mai Tai. Didn't have any really fruity, juicy flavors beyond the other ingredients that were providing that. The rum really wasn't doing anything. It was a very dead and boring Mai Tai. Didn't care for it. And then the 15 year, I liked it better than the 21 for sure. This had a little bit more fruit to it. It was a fine enough Mai Tai, let's just put it that way, but it didn't wow me. And then of course there's the Appleton 12 year. And look, for many people, this is the iconic single bottle rum for a Mai Tai. And I gotta say, it was fantastic. It had been a while since I'd had an Appleton 12 year Mai Tai. And it just reminded me like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And there's a reason why people love this in a Mai Tai. It just has the fruitiness, but it has a punchiness that these lacked. There was a kind of not funky punchiness like you get with some other Jamaican rum, but it had a kind of rummy punchiness. There was a little bit of like alcohol, in a good way, not alcohol burn, not ethanol, but just there was a presence of alcohol that really enhanced and heightened all the ingredients in the Mai Tai and made it seem like a drink with power. Yeah, I think that's the I'm gonna try. It was a drink with horsepower, with like just electricity. It just felt right. Like it felt like the Appleton 12 year was made for the Mai Tai, and the Mai Tai was made for the Appleton 12. I gotta tell you, man, it just kicks ass. Now, let's move on to the 8. This was surprising, even though this was the rum that I preferred sipping on neat compared to the rest. In a Mai Tai, it didn't do it for me. It just, frankly, it was neither here nor there. Like, it didn't have the power and kick of the 12 year, and didn't have, as I'll get to in the Signature in a minute, it didn't have the fruitiness of the Signature. That being said, I think I would still enjoy it over the 15 and the 21 year, but coming off the 12, like it felt like I was lacking something, even though as a sipper, I prefer this and it has more fruit on the palate. Weirdly enough for me, in a Mai Tai with all the other kind of fruity ingredients and whatnot, it's not like that fruitiness kind of gets enhanced. It just, I don't know, felt very muddled, which was very surprising. Which leads me, of course, to the Appleton Signature. Again, this was the biggest surprise in this lineup when it came to a Mai Tai, because I had very low expectations and I was wowed. It was, yes, a light Mai Tai, but it was very fruity. It felt very juicy. It just had so much flavor. Yeah, it didn't have any punch to it or strength and like electricity, but it just had this really nice, juicy, fruity quality to it. In a way, a Signature Mai Tai, to me, is like the perfect version of a Mai Tai that I could get like at a beach or a resort, right? Middle of the day, great hot weather, and you just want to drink a very tasty cocktail, but you want to drink a lot of them, right? And I think the Signature does that. It provides so much of that fruity flavor, has that low 40% ABV, and not even just the ABV of it all. Like, it doesn't feel like it's really hitting you on your palate and exhausting your palate. It doesn't feel like it demands your constant attention, unlike the 12 year, which I really, really like, but that kind of forces you to pay attention to it in a good way. The Signature doesn't do that. It lets you chill, kick back, relax, do what you're doing at the resort or the beach, but you're just drinking this really flavorful Mai Tai. In a way, I would say the Signature is my go-to daytime Mai Tai, and the 12 year is my go-to nighttime Mai Tai, right? The 12 has this element of like danger to it, right? Like if I have too many of them, I'm gonna be in trouble, versus the Signature feels like, oh yeah, I could crush a bunch of these and just enjoy myself and spend the rest of the afternoon just hanging out here in the water. So that's what I think of the core lineup, both as sippers and as Mai Tai rums. Let's move on to some of the other rums. Now we're gonna talk about our first non-Appleton branded rum, and that's Coruba. Now this, I'm pretty sure is made at New Yarmouth and not at Appleton, though potentially I guess there could be elements made at New Yarmouth and elements made at Appleton and blended together. I don't know, they don't tell us, and frankly, they don't tell us jack about Coruba. It feels like there's very little information out there in the world about Coruba. But I do know it's a staple for many people when it comes to home bartending. If you make any kind of tiki drinks, for a lot of people, this is something they love to keep stocked when you can find it. 40% ABV. Around where I live, it's around $23 to $25. Now, as you can see here, it's a very dark rum. That's not because it's been aged a very long time. It's not like it's been aged like 20 plus years. No, in fact, this has been aged very little, just probably a handful of years, but you're getting this color from a crap ton of caramel coloring. And that's perfectly okay. That's what this type of rum is for, right? It's a dark rum meant to provide some color to a cocktail, right? As well as, I think, potentially, as you sip this, molasses and caramel, which is kind of what you expect, what I'm looking for from a dark rum. But there is a bit of fruitiness here, which you don't necessarily get like in Myers, right? Because I think Myers is the other kind of dark Jamaican rum on the market. That's pretty well known. I don't think you get really any kind of liveliness of fruit in that, but I'm definitely picking up in the Coruba. But this still does have that element of bitterness and sweetness that I think is what's called for when you're putting in a kind of dark Jamaican rum in a cocktail. But I'm also getting like licorice, a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of sweetness, and a licorice note, which is interesting. Ultimately, it's not a rum that I really enjoy sipping neat, but I think its real purpose is in cocktails for sure. And I gotta say, from that cocktails perspective, for the longest time, I didn't get this rum. Like, I mean, I got it, like in terms of I had it, but I didn't get it. Like, it just felt like it wasn't doing anything of interest for me in cocktails. Then I came across a Mai Tai recipe from Garrett Richard from Sunken Harbor Club. And that particular recipe for the Mai Tai called for 3/4 of an ounce of Coruba and then 1.5 ounces of Denizen, the 8-year. And in that recipe, I suddenly got it. Like that hit of molasses was what I felt like I was missing for the longest time in my Mai Tais. Yeah, I was using Denizen or I was using other Jamaican rums and they were great, they were punchy, but that little hit of like dark molasses, bitter, sweet molasses was what I needed to really finally make me kind of really fall in love with Mai Tais, because prior to that, I didn't really care for them. I didn't hate them, I just, they were like whatever. But that particular spec, man, wowed me. So now I actually really do enjoy Coruba, not as a zipper, but as a cocktail rum in a Mai Tai. I think it's fantastic. Now, the last kind of year-round core release that we're going to talk about in this video is Wray and Nephew. This is also another very iconic rum, like the Appleton 12-year and the Coruba. It's bottled at 63% ABV, and around me, it's priced around $28 to $30. And this is unaged, and there's no color there. And it kind of is the rum that defined a category, that unaged overproof Jamaican rum category that includes Rumfire and Worthy Park Overproof and the Money Musk Overproof. This is the OG. This is made, if not all, mostly at New Yarmouth. Again, they're capable of doing, I guess, higher ester rums, and there is some of that here. But this is a pot calm blend. Unlike like Rumfire and Worthy Park, which are all pot still, this is a pot calm situation. And for me, this was definitely the first kind of high proof Jamaican rum that I ever had, and that's probably the case with a lot of people. You know, there is definitely on the aroma a very kind of clear and obvious industrial note, a little bit of sharpness, maybe a little bit of gasoline. But there's also pineapple. There's definitely fruit, and I didn't really get a whole lot of pineapple in any of the Appleton stuff here, but on the aroma here, for sure, tropical fruit, a little pineapple. Ooh, very drying. Starts off very lush, a lot of pineapple, very juicy and pineapple-y, and then it quickly, sharply dries out and ends up being very medicinal, very kind of cough medicine. It's not a rum that I really sip on, that most people don't really sip on. As the OG, this has a lot more flavor than you would think. In terms of cocktails, I definitely prefer Rumfire and Worthy Park Overproof. They just bring so much more to the table, so much more big, bold, Technicolor flavors, juicy, overripe bananas and strawberries and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And they really have a huge impact in cocktails. I mean, this is, in a way, like a bit of a senior citizen. It's been around the longest, and it's dependable, has a lot of experience, and really good at what they do. But the next generation or two down, they're bigger and brasher and bolder, and they're in your face. And I gravitate towards that. But the dependable grandfather over here, you can always rely on him, and he's got words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom to pass down. I don't know where this is going, but either way, it's Wray and Nephew. It does exactly what it does. It does it really, really well. It's big and bold, has fruitiness, juiciness, especially compared to some of the Appleton stuff. So those were the kind of year-round core releases that you can find whenever you're watching this, whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. Hopefully we're all still here in 5 years, and these rums are still here. In theory, then you'll be able to find all these. I do want to quickly cover a couple of specialty releases from Appleton, one of which is an ongoing series. The other is, or was, frankly, a one-off that you can't get your hands on anymore, but it's worth knowing about. And we're going to start off with the Appleton Hearts collection. I have here the 1993, and what the Hearts collection is, this kind of series, and they've released about, I think, 7 or 8 of them now. It's, first of all, a collaboration with Velier, which is an Italian bottler. They source rums from distilleries all over the world, bottle them up, and release them, and they collaborated with Appleton to put out this series. And what's very unique about this series is that, first and foremost, the most important thing, I think, is the fact that they're all pot still rums, right? Because everything we've had here is pot column. Finally, if you want to try Appleton pot still rum, this is one of the few ways that's relatively accessible. Well, accessible in that you can probably find it. They are kind of pricey, actually. This bottle cost me, I think, $330 or something like that. So what I have here, and there's a bunch of them, this is the 1993 release. So what they did was they took a bunch of casks. I think in this case there were, 14 or 15 different casks of this same vintage. So this is all rums that were distilled in 1993, and they took these casks and blended them together. Now, I think all of them are the same single mark. So the same kind of base distillate following the same recipe that has been aged since 1993. They took those, again, 14, 15, 17 different casks, blended them together, bottled them at 63% ABV, and charged you around $300, $330. And I gotta say, if you like any of this stuff from them, you absolutely owe it to yourself to try at least one of them as a pour at a bar, because it really is a whole different side to Appleton that you don't really get to see. You get kind of maybe peeks and glances at it, but until you try one of these, it's like a whole thing. To get Appleton at a high ABV, right, at 63% ABV, but an all pot still expression, it's kind of crazy. So this one being from 1993, it's a 29-year-old rum, which that's crazy, right? But to be able to try a very old expression, a all pot still expression, that's kind of a big deal. So with that in mind, let's take a sip of this 1993. Oh my gosh. I don't like it. I so regret buying this bottle. Yeah, it's cool that I have it, and it's cool to get like an all pot still thing from Appleton, and that it's so old, but I don't like it. I regret not having tried this before buying it. You know how I complained about the 21 being like really dry and kind of tannic and kind of bitter and medicinal? And that's nothing. This is like a lush, super rich rum in comparison to this. 29 years old at 63% ABV. This is incredibly drying. There's no more liquid, no more saliva in my mouth. It tastes like bitter, dry chocolate, bitter tobacco, a lot of licorice, and it makes my face do this. Look, I think intellectually, I really appreciate this rum and like it, especially to see a side of Appleton that you don't get to see. But in practice, when it comes to the heart, I don't really want to drink this rum. It's not for me. I do know that I don't like old rums, right? I talked about that with the 21 year. I don't like rums that are that old. Yet knowing that, I forked over $330 for this bottle. And yeah, what did I get? I get the thing that I don't like. Which is like overly woody, dry, overly tannic. It's like licking this desk. If I were to lick it now, it would taste exactly like what this rum tastes like. Not knocking it. I mean, I am knocking it for me personally, but I think there are probably people who really appreciate it. but way too aged for me. That being said, don't let that turn you off from the Hearts collection. I've had certain other expressions, especially the younger stuff, I think the 2002, that I've really liked. Those are brighter, more vibrant. They play slightly more in this space, right? The fruitier side of things. You still get some of the distillate character, but the longer you age anything, the more it's gonna take on from the wood. So ultimately, I would say this: try before you buy. If you ever have the opportunity and you're at a bar and they have any Hearts collection, yeah, it will be a pricey pour, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 bucks. It's worth it to get a side of Appleton that you've never experienced. Now, you may or may not like it, but I really think it's worth trying it at least once to see the caliber of rums that they produce in terms of the all pot still stuff. All right, and the last bottle that I want to talk about, it's the Appleton Estate 17-year-old Legend. So this was a one-off release from, has been 2 years already, 2.5 years, something like that. There are only 1,500 bottles of these produced worldwide. They're very hard to get. It's kind of a big damn deal. I'm very fortunate to have gotten a bottle. What's the big deal about this? Well, one, it's all pot still release. Again, a rarity. It is 49% ABV, which is definitely higher than the core stuff here. But more than that, this is the closest approximation that Appleton has made to the original Wray and Nephew 17-year rum from back in the day when Trader Vic at Trader Vic's made his first Mai Tai, right? So there's this whole legend around the first rum that he used to make the Mai Tai, which was supposedly a Wray and Nephew 17-year, which is no longer a thing that exists. He quickly, over the course of, I don't know, a handful of years, went through his inventory or what he was able to get access to, and there's no more of the 17-year. Then he switched to a Wray Nephew 15-year, and then over the years it kind of degraded from there. He changed up the rums that he used, but it was this kind of legend, this mythology around that original first Mai Tai rum. Based on the research, most of that rum, if not all of that rum, was made at Appleton Estate. So this was their kind of attempt to kind of recreate it as best as they could. They claim it was a one-time only thing, they'll never do it again. The moment they announced this, people were very, very excited, as was I, and people might have sold an arm and a leg to get their hands on it. Like, I think it retailed for around $500, which is what I paid for it, but a bunch of this stuff, or not a bunch, some of it is available on the secondary market, or at least was on the secondary market for a hell of a lot more than $500. So if you feel like you missed out on supposedly a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I guess you could spend on auction double, triple, 4 times, 5 times the price that I paid. Regardless of that, this is a blend of a bunch of marks, some marks that they don't no longer make or rarely make, aged 17 years, and let's give it a try. See, this is much better than this over here, this 29-year-old rum. I'd much rather drink this. There is still a little bit of like licorice absinthe thing going on here that I kind of started picking up on the 1993 Hearts collection, but there's still some fruitiness. There's this really nice citrus note. There's a little bit of fruit roll up here on the palate as well. A very kind of condensed down, stewed down pineapple note, like an astringent pineapple note here. Very tasty for sure, but as a sipper, is it doing something that is wildly different? No, but frankly, who cares? Really, the thing about this is how it does in a Mai Tai, obviously, right? And I've made a bunch of Mai Tais with this, as you can see. Most of what I've drank out of here was Mai Tais, and I gotta say, fan-freaking-tastic Mai Tais. Unbelievable Mai Tais, for sure. Were they the best absolute Mai Tais I've ever had? No, I've had equally amazing, fan-freaking-tastic Mai Tais with other rums. So I say that to tell you that if you've never had this, don't feel like you're missing out. However, if you still feel like you've missed out, there's a chance you might still be able to try the rum. There's a very, very small chance that you might stumble upon a bar that still has a bottle. At least at the time of this recording, I can think of 2 bars near me that still have some, so maybe there's a bar near you. Maybe. And maybe for around like $100 to $150, you might be able to get yourself a small pour of it, or maybe for like around $200, you might be able to get a Mai Tai with it. Now, should you do it? Is it worth it? Look, I don't know what your finances look like, and you don't need my permission, but you should do it. Now, before we end this video, I have 2 things I would love to see Wray Nephew and kind of Appleton release in the near future. Don't know if it's going to happen, but here's my kind of wish list. The first thing is a all pot still rum that's lightly aged and affordable, right? They had huge success with the 17-year-old Legend, and I think they could totally compete against a Smith & Cross, right? Smith & Cross is a high ABV, all pot still, relatively lightly aged rum that is dominating, right? Every bar has it. Most people who like making tiki drinks at home, they have it. Why should Smith & Cross dominate that space when I feel like Appleton should have a comparable kind of competitor in that space? They should do that. And I think it would be pretty damn good. So I'd love to see them kind of do something like that, an all pot still rum. Again, you don't have to put an age statement on there. Just could be a handful of years, but high in proof, all pot still, because I do think clearly they're capable of making very flavorful, expressive things like they did with the Heart stuff and the 17-year-old Legend. And I would love to have an all pot still rum from them, and I think you would too. And the last thing I would love to see them release, which I don't think they'll ever will, is a high proof version of the Signature. I gotta say, the biggest takeaway, the biggest thing that I got out of doing this, the research for this video and doing this video, was how much I've come to really kind of love and appreciate the Signature. I love the flavors here. ABV is super lacking, so I would love for them to do something like Mount Gay did with the Eclipse, where they released the Navy Strength, which is the same Eclipse that you either love or you hate, but at like a super high ABV, right? I think it's like 57% ABV or something like that. I would love for Appleton to do that, right? Higher proof, but keep all the same flavors, because I think the flavors in this rum, spectacular. Love the fruitiness, love the stone fruit on here, the light molasses, the light honey, and to get that in an amped up version, my God, I would love that. That would be my go-to bottle to make drinks with all the time. So Appleton, if you're watching this, and I know you are, please, can we get a high proof version of this? And that, my friends, was my guide on all things Appleton, New Yarmouth, and Wray and Nephew. I'm super curious, what is your favorite rum, either from Appleton or the overall Wray and Nephew portfolio? Let me know by leaving a comment down below. Now, if you want to support this channel, then check out my Patreon page where I have a bunch of exclusive content. Plus, by signing up, you get access to the Rum Revival Discord server where you can chat with fellow rum lovers. Thanks so much for watching. Catch you all next time. Cheers.